Nkonki has the professional capacity to deliver on your external and internal audit assurance requirements. Visit nkonki.com for more.
Welcome back. Mervyn King and I are discussing the role and responsibilities of the non-exec director with our guests Anton van Wyk and Faye Mukadam. Let's get on to the internal controls of a company. I'm sure it's an area which instills great fear among non-execs because they don't have direct controls. What is the latest international thinking there?
Thanks, Leigh. You've got 3 or 4 hours we can discuss this topic. Maybe let's just take a step back and sort of start at the sort of a CEO level. You know, your CEOs today, I think, need to be hybrid leaders. They're concerned with the business as it's been managed at the moment, but also need to have a 3 to 5 year outlook as to what will their business and their company look like in the next 3 to 5 years. I think that sets the foundation as to the concerns and the risks that those CEOs face. And there's a range of them. You know, there was a study done recently and in fact presented at Davos where 3 key areas were identified. One was around the rapid technological advances that we're seeing. The other was around business interruption and the impact on business interruption and things like urbanization, social unrest. And the third was around resource scarcity and climate change. Now the reason I raise that is internal control is becoming, you know, the concept of internal control is pervasive across the entire organization. Not only the financial control, but also all other controls that help us manage our non-financial assets of the business. And I think the questions that directors ask is really, where do I get assurance around, with regard to those controls? How well are those controls managing the risks that I face and our business faces and our market might face, our industry? And we're seeing, you know, from a South African perspective, obviously companies at King 3 have set the standard, but internationally you've got Sarbanes-Oxley, you've got EU reform, audit reform now in the European Union, where a lot more needs to be done. So Sarbanes-Oxley sort of pushes those organizations into really a positive assurance process around the internal control, where I think from a South African context we are still looking at limited assurance in this regard. We haven't yet progressed, and there are a number of factors that impact it. One is skill. I think it's cost as well has a big impact. So the importance then of concepts like combined assurance and integrated assurance around the integrated report, I think, are becoming a lot more relevant in our environment, and that forces more focus on the first line of defence. I mentioned earlier on, you know, we need to take out any sort of sloppiness around first line. Management need to be fully aware of what their responsibilities are with regard to first line defense.
The first line of defense being management or controls?
Correct. Management. Yeah. And management's responsibility in ensuring that the control environment is sound, it's implemented.
So it is management's responsibility.
Correct.
But then what responsibility does the average director have?
Well, so you're asking me, Faye?
Yeah.
Faye?
Well, the average director has to rely on these lines of defense that Anton's talking about. The first line of defense would be your management line, the second line internal audit, and the third external audit. Those lines of defense have certain tasks that they are required to do in ensuring that the internal controls are working in such a way that the company is doing what it's supposed to do, thereby giving assurance to the directors. Management, Anton mentioned that management shouldn't be sloppy, that they should be aware of what they are required to do.
Yeah.
And that talks to a whole different culture around consequence management and accountability, which ensures that management, when they see something falling by the wayside or any slippages at all, that there is a response. These things, or where there is any kind of deviation from the path that was agreed on, these things should be escalated if need be, and that is what the board would deal with if there is anything that they need to respond to, of course.
But surely, as an independent non-exec director, where you don't go into the company every day, you can't see whether management is actually exerting control over internal controls or not. Is it fair to make the independent non-executive director sign off on internal controls of a company?
Well, certainly until about, I'd say 7 years ago, directors were signing that in a dark hole.
Yeah.
Because there's no way a director, for example, to take a huge organisation like Standard Bank, that a non-executive director would know what was happening in 1,000 branches operating from Cape Town to London with 2,000 suppliers, 9 million accounts, and you sign the controls are adequate and effective, which is an AFS requirement. So the principle was developed in internal audit that the CAE, the head of internal audit, should do a written report about the adequacy and effectiveness of controls to the audit committee. It's filtered through the audit committee up to the board. The board interrogates it. Now it's being informed. Now in that context of information they can sign that it's adequate and effective. So in that aspect, that one aspect alone, the internal audit has become very important. But certainly speaking for myself, I would never become a non-executive director of a company that never had very strong internal audit, because you sit during a 12-month cycle, let's say 4 or 5 board meetings in a year, you have no assurance on what's in your pack. You rely completely on that first line of defence, the veracity and quality and trust of management. Well, they might be very trustworthy, but they may be making a mistake or something, bona fide mistake. So the question of these checks and balances right through the year with internal audit is critical. And whereas Anton was talking about, the purview of internal audit has increased tremendously over the last 8-10 years. There's internal audit, not only a compliance-driven backroom exercise with a batch of invoices, it's now internal audit on sustainability issues. There's internal audit on treasury. There's internal audit on strategy. So these things are absolutely critical. And the skills involved in internal audit is not only an internal auditor or a CA, the environmental lawyers and things helping them do this internal audit. And at a conference of IAA recently, I said, maybe the time has come to recognize the independence of the internal auditor, and with appreciation that he has this independence built in by the head of internal audit reporting to the chairman of the audit committee, open door policy to the chairman. So in fact he can tell the CEO, listen fellow, you're not following this control or that, without fear of being fired. He's actually got independence. And so with that independence, maybe they should change their name.
To what?
To independent internal assurance. Because we need that assurance, particularly in integrated thinking.
Also known as no longer the backroom boy.
Correct.
Okay, but the head of internal audit, he's an employee of the company. He reports to the CEO. So why would the CEO, a crooked CEO, not exert pressure on the head of internal audit to say, you sign off on those controls?
Okay, I think first the internal audit reports into the audit committee. There's a line of reporting to the CEO, more functional line than anything else. But I think rather than getting into that debate, maybe what I should do is invite Mervyn to attend all my meetings I want to have globally to get that message across. And I think that message, the message that Mervyn has now given, I think is fundamentally where internal audit is going. The old just purely assurance provider is a thing of the past. Internal auditors now need to, if they aren't already, move up that continuum to trusted advisor, improve, increase on their mandate, or get their mandate increased or extended to include the other areas that require assurance in the organisation. I think the independence point, one needs to kind of manage that as well. But you also need to be objective. And it's no use someone who has all that good information, and all they're doing is, as the old adage was, going out and bayoneting the wounded. They need to go and find out what is going on in the business, but have the skill to make the right kind of recommendations to improve that area of control.
Okay, so Anton, is there small risk or no risk that the head of internal audit is not really independent?
I don't think there is a risk. If you've got a strong audit committee and an audit committee chair, I think that independence is put to bed. We've seen issues where internal auditors have been whistleblowers, and the audit committee has supported that internal audit to the extent that executive management were taken to task, and some some executive management removed from the business. I think that independence is very much dependent on the strength of character of the audit committee and the audit committee chair, and also the ability for that internal auditor to have those private sessions, those executive sessions with the, or non-executive sessions with the audit committee to discuss really what is happening in the business.
So if you're a director today, you really want to ensure that there's a strong audit committee on the board.
A strong audit committee, and it goes back to our earlier discussion points, a strong audit committee that's populated by individuals who are not just sufficiently skilled and have the requisite experience, but who themselves are courageous leaders. So even though they are acting on behalf of the board as the primary board subcommittee members, that they have the courage to ask those intellectually naive questions, they challenge, they interrogate what is being presented to them, whether it be by management or internal audit. And I think that internal auditors themselves, alluding to the question you posed to Anton earlier, they too need to have the courage. So if there is some unhealthy tension between your internal auditor as an employee and the CEO, that if there is some wrongdoing or maybe bona fides mistakes which are not embraced and fixed quickly enough, that the internal auditor, whether employed or not, should have the courage to stand up and do something about it, and certainly report into the audit committee chair, if nothing else.
Mervyn, we haven't got too much time left, but a brief comment on the important role of the audit committee.
Audit committee is absolutely critical, and it is correct that the audit committee is of great assistance to the board in presenting a fair presentation, financially speaking. But the new Companies Act changed the character of the audit committee altogether. The audit committee is now an instrument of the company, and it's a statutory body. So members of the audit committee are responsible to the company and not to the board. What is happening in practice is that the audit committee, although appointed at AGMs by shareholders, they are taking the recommendation of directors who should be, because the directors know better than the shareholders who could add value as members of the audit committee. And the audit committee in practice is reporting to the board and helping the board to comply with IFRS, etc.
And that sounds like a whole new discussion. Hopefully we'll get onto in the future. We have to end this now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us. There'll be more on doing business in the 21st century in next week's show. We'll see you then. Bye.
Now is the time for change. Doing business in the 21st century was proudly brought to you by Nkonki, the external and internal audit assurance providers. Log on to Nkonki.com to